Hey everyone, it's Andrew Klavan with this week's interview with the wonderful Megan Basham. It has been too long since we have had Megan on the show. She's obviously a DailyWire writer, and she's one I admire immensely for her talent, but also for her integrity and her faith. Her New York Times best-selling book, Shepherds for Sale, is an indictment of evangelical churches that have been taken over and corrupted by the left. It's a book that had one contract canceled because it offended people in high places, but it was picked up again by Broadside Books, an imprint of HarperCollins, as is my publisher, Zondervan. And you'll notice that one thing I didn't say was that the book had a contract canceled, even though Megan offered to change it. And I didn't say that because that never happened. She had the rock solid integrity and courage to stand up, even to have a book contract canceled. If something's happened to me, it's a horrible, horrible experience. It's like going through a trap door. But that kind of integrity is far rarer than you think, and she and her faith and her courage have all been tested recently in a battle with cancer, and as with all of us dealing with the things we're dealing with now, it's being tested again, so I wanted to talk to her about all that. Megan, it is great to see you. It's been way too long.
It has been. It's so good to be here between, cancer and all the expanding we've been doing at DailyWire.
Yeah.
I haven't been here in a while, and I'm excited to be back.
It is nice to see you again. And so we'll start out on a lighthearted note. Let's talk about this cancer. It's
Right.
you came to faith under difficult circumstances. You've written about this. You went down a bad path. You paid the price, and you were lifted up by our Lord. And you've taken on a big opponent, the church, and you've gotten on the bestseller list. And then you get this diagnosis. Maybe it's a stupid question, but what is that experience like?
Yeah, it was a roller coaster ride in 2024. So, I went from, I think it was mid-August, I got the call from my editor. You made the New York Times bestseller list, and there was big celebration there, even though they slighted me a little bit, Andrew, I'm just going to tell you, because my agent was looking at the sales numbers and going, you should be at number 2 or 3 on the hardcover list. No, they didn't put me on the hardcover list. They put me on the combined list, which was electronic and hardcover, so I'd be a little further down, but I still made it.
Yeah, they couldn't deny you.
Yeah. And then flash forward to, I've been having some digestive problems, and I knew that I had issues and had just sort of fought with doctors for a while because of my age. I specifically asked, could this be cancer? Like way back in March of 2024, I had been to the emergency room with terrible bowel cramping. And I asked them in the emergency room, they did a CT scan, could this be cancer? Because my grandmother died of cancer, my aunt died of cancer. So I've always been very aware of cancer. And they said, no, we don't see anything on the CT that indicates that. So, flash forward to Thanksgiving last year, and I kept pushing for the colonoscopy, and they're like, well, at this point, it'll be your birthday, and then you can have a colonoscopy. And I was like, is there any way to move that up? And they're like, we don't see what you're describing wouldn't trigger, moving it. So anyway, God knew all that was going on. And so when I finally did get the colonoscopy, I woke up, out of that sort of haze to hear the doctor saying, we found a large tumor. Not only do we think it's cancer, we think it's advanced. So, then this was literally the day before Thanksgiving. And in God's providence, some friends were with us for Thanksgiving who had been through a major cancer battle themselves. Dear friends of ours, we've known them since my husband and I got married. They were the gentleman in this couple, they were roommates before we got married. And he had been through Ewing sarcoma, I think stage 3 Ewing sarcoma, which is very rare for adults. And they just held my hand through the whole weekend saying, here's what's going to happen. This is what you need to do now. Get registered with this, make these calls. They were making calls going, we're going to find you, the best oncologist in this area. So, those are probably the hardest days I've ever faced in my life as we were waiting to find out when they say advanced, how advanced. And in the back of my mind, I had a friend who I had lost the year before from stage 4 colon cancer. Exact same thing.
Yeah, it's getting common with younger people.
It is. She was only 42 years old, mom of 3 little babies. And so, my friend Ashley was in my mind, and it was just more sleepless nights than I've ever had. And I can tell you what I did. I've always been a John MacArthur girl, and I have never relied on that ministry, Grace to You, more than I have in those few days between, because of course it was Thanksgiving, right? So you're like, now I have to wait like a week to talk to anybody. So I would put John MacArthur's messages on when I was going to sleep to try to get some sleep and just listen to them as I was trying to fall asleep. And so, when we did finally get to meet with the doctor, they said it is stage 3, got all the scans, and there's a big difference between stage 3 and stage 4. Like, I was late stage 3. So they're going, you're 60% chance that we can treat this and cure it. If you get into stage 4, which I was close to, you're now at a 15%. So you just fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
So those were really dark days. And then, some reprieve when you find out, okay, it's late stage 3, but it's stage 3. So that's good. We're not quite stage 4 yet. And then you just go through the fight of, okay, so now we're going to do chemo radiation and chemo and surgery. And suddenly, like, the Psalms meant more to me than they have ever meant in my life. And things that I didn't understand in scripture before, I suddenly got. Like, I can't remember which Psalm it is in, but I think it was a Psalm by David where he said, I said in my alarm, every man is a liar. And I suddenly felt that with doctors, because they would say conflicting things to me. I didn't trust them. And I was going, in my alarm, I feel that all of you are liars and I trust nobody. And so I really got these things in a new way. And, just kind of did the King Hezekiah thing for weeks, where I just had my face to the wall and was in prayer constantly and suddenly reading. And people were so great. People sent me, books of the Puritans and so many wonderful Bible studies. And my friend Rosaria Butterfield drove me down a Vitamix because she felt that I needed to work on my health. And so, it was just kind of all of that processing and pleading with the Lord for my life.
Yeah. I was, meanwhile, pleading with the Lord for your life. And I kind of want to ask you about that, because I'm sure all your friends were praying. I'm sure your family was praying. You're praying. And we kind of hear nowadays these thoughts and prayers. What a waste of time. What a foolish thing to do. How do you feel about that? How did you feel about it at the time when you didn't know what the result would be?
I can tell you that that's where the rubber meets the road on your belief in prayer. And I'm a Calvinist. I've always been kind of a, not a very demonstrative Christian in church. I'm not a hands up kind of girl. But when this happened, my belief in prayer came to the fore, because suddenly I was much more charismatic than I'd ever been. The first thing I did was James 5. I called the elders, and I'm like, it was literally like probably the first call I made was, can I come to the church? And I want the elders to pray over me. Because, it says in James 5, if any of you is sick, call the elders and be anointed with oil. I have never in my life considered being anointed with oil. But, that Sunday when we went to church and I saw one of the elders, I kind of sheepishly went up and started to explain my situation. And then I said, well, I would like the elders to pray over me. And I don't know if James 5 is supposed to be a literal interpretation and he said, well, we have actually, physically anointed with oil. I'm like, great, I want that. I want the physical anointing with oil package. I don't want to leave, anything out. So we did that. We went to the chapel and had the elders pray over me and anoint me with oil. And we did that. So, for me, it really strengthened my belief in prayer. I would say, I've always been a prayerful person, but I don't know that I had the faith that, God was listening to those prayers and answering those prayers in the same way I did when I was pleading for my life, when I was saying, okay, Lord, I know that you can give me a reprieve here. I know that there are models in scripture like Hezekiah where you will say, okay, you were under a death sentence and I'm going to pull that back. And so that's what I was asking for. I don't know. I didn't really have any doubts and thoughts and prayers in that moment. I, in fact, suddenly was like, everyone pray over me. If you want to pray over me, please feel free.
Yeah, really. And I remember you said at one point something like, you're not like Paul who says it doesn't matter whether I stay or go. You want to stay, which I thought was, I thought was great. I thought pretending that you're pious at some higher level is, to me, just an absolute waste of time, since God knows exactly where you are. And
Right.
I think you might as well talk honestly with him. So at this point, the treatment has been good, right? You're in a good place. I mean, but yeah.
Yeah. So I, after going through all the treatment, started in January, finished on June 30th. And after that, we got clean margins. So that's what you want. When you go into surgery, you want to see that there's no cancer beyond where they've cut out. And so I was responsive to treatment, not as much as we would have liked. I didn't have a complete response, and I still had a positive lymph node, which, if you know cancer, that puts you at a higher risk. And I had some nerve and blood vessel invasion, and that puts you at a higher risk. So, we're remaining prayerful, because right now I have no evidence of disease, and we're so incredibly thankful for that and praising God for that. But, I kind of looked at it this way, that I went, it's like the thorn in the side. I'm like, I'm not going to get just a clean escape where I forget about this thing. It's going to stay with me, and I'm going to be a little hobbled, and that's going to require me to continue in prayer and leaning on the Lord, because it's still there, knowing, okay, I have a higher risk of recurrence. So it keeps me conscious of my mortality. Let's put it that way.
Well, I wanted to ask you that, because I mean, at my age, you get conscious, you get real conscious of your mortality. You know that, like every Christmas could be your last. You understand it, and you just that there's no reprieve, because you're coming down that straight away. And it's like, so I'm wondering, someone your age, what effect is that? I know the effect it has on me. It has good and bad effects. It makes me, a little bit more cautious than I've ever been, but at the same time, it makes me very appreciative of every single second. I'm wondering the effect it has on you.
Yeah, probably the same. It's strange. I'll be totally fine and almost kind of forget about it. And then my husband and I were in California for John MacArthur's memorial, and maybe it's because of that it just came into my mind in a stronger way. But like, we were shopping, and suddenly I almost had, like, I'm not a panic person, like what felt like a panic attack in the middle of Nordstrom Rack, where I just suddenly went, I'm shopping, and a month from now I could get my next scan, and they could be told, oh, you're stage 4. And I will spend, the remaining months of my life fighting that. So those things come into your head, and that's part of what keeps you preaching to yourself rather than listening to yourself. And that's really the only way I can approach it, because I am, as my surgical oncologist would put it, kind of a high anxiety patient. So I can morbidly obsess on this easily. Mm-hmm. And the only way I have felt to deal with that really is to, okay, I'm going to have to memorize passages. And when it starts, I just have to start reciting them, or I have to put on a message and start listening to it, because I transparently can spiral pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And I love it when doctors say that. You're the worrying sort. Like, if I'm talking to a doctor, yes.
Right.
If I'm talking to a baseball fan, no. It's so. One of the things, I mean, this kind of troubles me. I almost never think about the afterlife. I mean, mm-hmm. I believe in it, but as we say, help my unbelief. I've also,
yep.
How is your relationship to that concept changed or not changed or developed?
I mean, I do think, and it's weird because it's not all the time. You would love to think that you're so pious that you're, again, like you're like Paul, whether to live is Christ, to die is gain. And you try to take hold of that. But the reality is, most of the time, I don't really want to gain through death, So
yeah. Thanks anyway. Thanks anyway.
Right. But I would experience through it like moments where, and it surprised me, like I would not have thought that, being that high anxiety type of person, that I would have been capable with that level of peace, where I went, actually, it's going to be okay. My kids, and part of it, you probably have felt this too, that it's your own mortality, but then it's also thinking about your kids and going, I don't want to see my daughters get married without me. I don't want to not be there. I don't want to be there. I want to be there to guide them through proms and dates and having babies, and like the things that I would miss out on. And I would have to remind myself that whatever heaven offers is going to be so much greater than that. And God's got my kids too. So if in his perfect providence, he takes me off the board at this moment, he also has a covering for my kids. And I have to trust in that. Because I did have a friend who lost his wife to cancer. And I think she was frantically trying at the end to find a miracle cure. And he warned me, and he did say, she missed the last moments. She missed a lot of great conversations that she and I could have had. She missed time with her grandkids, and because she was chasing after that cure. And it was actually a hard thing, I think, for him to say to me, because all you want to hear from everybody is you're going to be fine. You're going to be great. You're going to beat this thing. And that was not what he said to me. He said, listen, if you get there, don't miss it. Mm-hmm. And that was actually a really loving thing. And so I have thought about that a lot, that, I've kind of stepped back a little bit from work and from all of the dreams and things I thought I would chase, because I went, I don't want to miss. If these are my last few years, I don't want to have not spent them with the people who matter the most to me.
Yeah. That's everything. It really is. So we're now in this time, it's a difficult time. It really is. I mean, it's like, I think this Charlie Kirk thing has hit everybody hard. We were part of the business. We knew him. But I think it's really touched everybody because of the revelation that silence is not violence, words are not violence. Mm-hmm. I always, every time anybody wants to say that, I want to punch them one and say that is violence. And now we see how horrific violence is. Horrific. It is a terrible, terrible thing. So it's so easy to get lost in anger. It's so easy to get lost in grief. It's so easy to get lost in fear. Does any of this experience, this personal experience that you have, come into this moment as a political moment? And we've lost, you've lost your main preacher as well, so mm-hmm. Is there some way of translating the things that you're being shown in your personal challenge, some way of transferring that into the bigger challenge?
One of the things that's been interesting to me, as somebody who writes so much about the evangelical world and Protestantism and Christianity, to sort of sit back and watch the reevaluation of Charlie Kirk, because a lot of the major evangelical Christian institutions that are kind of known for being, intellectual publications or intellectual figures would not have openly associated with Charlie Kirk. Mm. And that's just a fact, they would have considered him a polemicist, a bomb thrower, somebody who was too involved in the culture war. And suddenly, for me, who's kind of part of the culture war too, in a pretty strong way with the DailyWire, to sit back and watch their reevaluation. I think it's been surprising to some of them to see the outpouring of love and affection for Charlie, for his Christian witness, not just for, his incredible political advocacy, but for his Christian witness. And you're seeing some of them say, I didn't know about that part of his life. I didn't know how outspoken he was. I don't know if you know Elisa Childers. She has a great apologetics podcast, particularly for women. And she came out, and this is so humble and great of her to say this, to say, I turned down some speaking engagements with TPUSA because I didn't know if I wanted to be aligned with Charlie Kirk and his organization, because I thought, maybe they were just too hot politically, and she said I was wrong. And I actually am now so inspired by him, and I was wrong to not get involved with them. And I would do it differently if I had the opportunity. And all that told me was, you know what? God's safeguarding your reputation, because I've gone through that. This book came out and there was some fierce pushback, because as you would expect, a lot of the people I wrote about didn't like it. They didn't like being written about.
Yeah, exactly.
And they have some pretty big levers they could pull too, in order to sort of dismiss me as a muckraker. And, I was taken out of context, or, and for example, I heard two guys from one of these publications I'm referring to, the Gospel Coalition, do a whole interview where they were discussing my book. And they both were like, it's not the sort of thing I'd want to give attention to. And it was lowbrow. But then throughout the interview, they both admitted they hadn't read it. I love them. So it's not the sort of thing you or anyone else should give attention to, but we don't actually know what's in it. This is just what we've heard about it. And that happened a lot. Members of my own family said, I tried to give it to my pastor. He wouldn't read it because he'd heard negative things. And that was painful for me. And then I look at Charlie and I go, I know that he went through the exact same thing, that there were people who kept him at arm's length because they saw him that same way. And now they're being forced, in some cases, being, a little bit drug kicking and screaming. And in some gracious cases, like Elisa, people openly saying, I had him wrong. And so you go, okay, God had his reputation. He didn't need to worry about that. He just needed to speak truth. He just, needed to do what he thought was right. And God was going to take care of how the world saw Charlie Kirk. And I will be honest, before this week, I would not have expected this outpouring of love and respect and affection for him. So that's been really uplifting.
As summer's busy pace gives way to autumn, many of us find ourselves embracing the slower season. Quiet weekends, hot drinks, cozy evenings with our favorite shows. I thought this comfortable routine was perfect until we transformed our bedroom into a true sanctuary that made these crisp fall nights with blankets and movies even more extraordinary. I am talking to you about Boll and Branch's bed bundles that make it incredibly easy to upgrade your entire bedding setup with just one click this fall. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh with new sheets and blankets, or you want to completely transform your sleep space, there is a bundle designed specifically for your needs. They've thoughtfully curated collections for every type of sleeper, so whether you tend to run hot and need cooling fabrics, or you love to stay cozy and warm, or you simply want the softest possible feel against your skin, you will find exactly what you're looking for. Every bundle is crafted from the highest quality 100% organic cotton in durable, long-lasting designs, and you can customize the colors to perfectly match your style. I use them, I love them, and they look terrific. Plus, they offer a 30-night worry-free guarantee so you can rest easy knowing your investment is protected. Boll and Branch makes upgrading your bed easier than ever with curated bundles for a sanctuary of comfort. For a limited time, you can get 20% off bed bundles at bollandbranch.com/Klavan. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/KLAVAN to save up to 20%. Exclusions apply. Yeah, it is. It's really interesting because I've listened. I had already heard a lot of what he had to say, and I always thought, he had a skill. It's funny. I kind of envied him because almost everything he said religiously, I agreed with. But he had a way of saying it definitively, where I like to explore all the complications and nuances and how I'm going to get to the place of love and all this stuff in a world that has a moral order. And I thought like somehow he was doing it with this kind of, he sounded a lot more ferocious than the things, it's kind of like Trump, than the things he was actually saying. Right. And I think that was a skill in a way, because it made people feel that he was really, bringing the punch, but he wasn't. He was actually preaching the love of the gospel as well as the truth of the gospel and the justice of the gospel. It was really amazing thing. I'm
a little worried about who. You probably feel this way too. There's weird fringy movements happening of in Christianity.
Yeah.
And I look at Charlie and I go, he was bold and masculine, for lack of a better word. He had a very manly way of sort of just presenting these things. But he was presenting true things and good things and righteous things. And so I'm a little concerned about people who are sort of claiming his mantle, being bold, but they're being bold for not good things.
Yeah, I know. And
that concerns me. So, I'm keeping that in my prayers too, to go, okay, Lord, you need to bring up new leaders who are good, wholesome leaders and not, people who kind of want to mix some excrement in with the truth.
It's funny because at the Daily Wire, where I think we've really done a good job of having a rounded view of conservatism and of religion and all this stuff, as we started to succeed, as we started to break through the barrier, that's when all these kind of limpids started to stick to us, spouting stuff that we thought was reprehensible and also attacking us. And I would always think, you wouldn't even be here if it weren't for us. It's like we opened this path and now these guys are getting it. It's true. I should mention again that your book, the New York Times bestselling book, is Shepherds for Sale, a really intense. I don't know how people could ignore it. I mean, it was so intensely researched and so well researched and so blunt. But the thing that I'm wondering is your depiction of a church being corrupted by the left was very deep, and we had a long conversation about it on the show. The night that Trump was reelected, I felt this kind of warm blanket of relief pass over me, and I thought, we beat him. Not because Trump was elected, though I was really happy about that. But what I was really even more happy about was that the media and the the cultural machine of the left had done everything they could to stop him. And not only because of his incredible courage and resilience, but also because there was now a new media that could pick out their lies in real time. And that's why I think he's had such a huge effect in the second term, where he'll say, do this, and people just do it because they sense that the culture has turned in his favor. And I'm wondering, is there any sense of that in the church? I mean, when we were talking about the church before, you were talking about people just being swept away on this creepy leftist theory. Is there any sense like, oops, like maybe?
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And, it's coming in two forms. You have a few who I have a ton of respect for, of those who are saying, I got it wrong. I mentioned Elisa Childers, speaking about Charlie Kirk. Another is, if you know Professor Andrew Walker, who is kind of one of those intellectuals. He writes a lot at various outlets. He has, on a couple of different things, said, at one point he had advocated, I think, for that pronoun hospitality when dealing with transgender people, which I never thought was a good idea. And others who picked up on his idea have not, retracted that. But he came out and said, I don't think I understood at the time how big of an issue it was going to become and how important it was going to be to fight it. And I can see that. I can think this is such an insane thing. I can't believe it's really going to take that great of a grip on our culture. And so he was leaning into love and saying, I wanted to be loving to these people, but he now sees it, and actually that was a mistake, and has said so. And I think he also was one of the people who advocated you should get the COVID vaccine to show you love your neighbor, which, as we had discussed at the time, I really felt was going over the line and binding people's consciences and saying you need to do this debatable thing to show you love your neighbor. He retracted that too. So there's been a few people like that, but they're very few and far between. What I'm seeing more is what some people are dubbing the great rehab tours. and it's hard because on the one hand, you're like, I don't believe this is authentic. I think, you're just putting your finger in the wind and going, now it's blowing this way. So I'm going to change my rhetoric and I'm going to come over to this side and kind of pretend like I was here all the time. And we are seeing that. I think you're seeing some really large, well-known pastors, even some that I write about in the book, like a former Southern Baptist Convention president, which, if you're not familiar with the Southern Baptist Convention, it's the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S. So you're seeing some of their leadership sounding more conservative. They are no longer talking about George Floyd and social justice and, reforming our policing system because it's racist. You're not hearing that anymore. And there's one part of your flesh that wants to go, I'm going to stick it to him.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, you guys didn't say this. This is not where you were. But on the other hand, you go, this is a win, right? It's good that they're shifting places.
Yes.
And for the guys who I think were just sort of mouthing what was popular in the culture, I'm tending to give them a lot of grace and a lot of room to move. For those who engineered it, I have a lot less grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a few who I'm like, no, you went far enough that you need to speak on the record and, quite frankly, repent. So I'm waiting for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like the comic relief of a follower of Christ holding his finger to the wind. I mean, there's something hilariously comic about it. We have to end on something a little bit more cheerful, which is that in spite of everything I have tried to tell you, you have your self-destructive streak has, reasserted itself, and you wrote a novel which you and sold it, which is amazing. What on earth moved you to do such a thing?
Am writing, I will say, because it was so unexpected when it happened, and that's Providence too. So the editor, who absolutely against his will, was forced to drop my book, ended up he and some other former colleagues from, I think it's pronounced Baen Books, which is distributed by Simon & Schuster, had started a new imprint called Arc Press.
Who's
so
the
Tony
editor?
Daniel, Tony Daniel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's great. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So he messaged me and said, we're starting this. I have my entire life, I've aspired to be you. I wanted to be a novelist my whole life. And he's like, you are one of the few nonfiction authors I've worked with that I think has the chops to write a novel. Is there anything you've wanted to write? And I said, actually, I have one I've already, started writing, many years ago and would love to finish, and pitched it to them. And they said, we love this. We want it to be our Christmas tentpole release. So
I love it.
It was based on, probably 10 years ago, I saw a notice in The Guardian about the fathers of obstetrics in the 18th century, William Hunter and William Smellie, great name. I'm not going to use that. Are now being their legacy is being reassessed, and I don't know if this is true, but it's great for a novel. It has been considered that perhaps they were soliciting the murder of pregnant women in order to get the level of research that they needed to initiate the field of obstetrics. So I went, oh, that would be a great story. So that's how that came about. So look for it, hopefully shortly before Christmas.
Oh, that is great.
Year.
Well, congratulations. That is really exciting. And it's just the kind of dark, ugly thing I would expect to come out of your horror. Imagine. Have you ever seen the film The Body Snatchers, based on the Robert Louis Stevenson story?
I think I saw it probably when I was like a kid, and I don't remember it very well.
You should take a look at it. It's Boris Karloff film. But it's really interesting in what you're talking about, because it is a good story, and it's the original story is one of the greatest short stories ever written, and just absolutely terrifying. It's Robert Louis Stevenson, The Body Snatchers. What's the name of your novel?
The Vesalius Club.
The what?
The Vesalius Club, based on Andreas Vesalius, the famous anatomist of the 15th century.
Cool.
So he was a famous grave robber, did all kinds of unsavory things to advance the field of medicine. So that's
Excellent. Well, congratulations. Megan, I continue to pray for you. I'm sure a lot of people do. And it's wonderful to see you. You look great. And it's great to talk to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's so good to be here.
It's always a pleasure. All right. Great to see Megan Basham. Again, her best-selling book is Shepherds for Sale. She's got a new novel coming out for Christmas. Watch for that. Really, I first met her when she interviewed me for a Christian publication, and I immediately thought, wow, she is a talent, and recommended it here to the Daily Wire, although I'm not sure that's why. Nobody ever listens to my recommendations, but she really has become everything I thought she could be. Just terrific. On Friday, however, I will be back just by my lovable, lonesome self with the Andrew Klavan Show. I hope you will be there as well.